We are going to talk about following the hype and when not to follow the hype. And prepping for today, I was kind of going back in time thinking about the different cycles we've seen. AI today, crypto yesterday. There was the creator economy for a couple of quarters, big data, mobile, social, local. The list goes on. Some have been big, some have been not. So to help founders figure out which ones they should follow and when not to, please welcome to the stage Sophia from Trust Fund, Katelin from 776, Sarah from Cleo Capital, and your host, Walter Thompson.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for joining us today.
Thanks, guys.
Great to be here. All right, first question. Does anyone out here remember Digisense? Show of hands. Okay, it's a throwback. In the late 90s, its founders set out to build a peripheral called the iSmell that emitted odors. They raised $20 million, and they kicked off a mini boom that drew in other startups like the Thenko Pod Aroma Generator and the Trisense Scent Dome. I'm still not sure what problem they were trying to solve, but the digital scent hype cycle seems to be dead and buried. Tech is basically, in my point of view, it's one continuous hype cycle that bleeds into the next. So regardless of prevailing trends, many VCs probably say that they're always betting on the founder and their ability to execute, not really the underlying idea itself. For founders, it's always good to chase a hype cycle, but only if you have a real product with a defensible moat. Investors are looking for bandwagon jumpers, but they want to find good bets. So they want to know when to sit things out. We're going to talk about all of that today, and we're definitely going to get into AI as well. So again, thanks for joining us. First question, starting with an anecdote. I crossed paths with an investor who said that he always avoids early hype cycles because, as a matter of principle, he said he's only looking for basic unit economics and social proofs because it keeps him honest. So my first question to the panel is, when should founders ignore the hype, and should they ever? And starting with you, Sophia.
Yeah. I mean, I think founders in general should ignore the hype unless they have some kind of domain expertise that would kind of grandfather them into whatever the hype is. So following hype just for the sake of hype is always a bad idea. I think ideas are important, and I invest primarily in seed stage companies with Trust Fund, but the idea is more important with something like AI or a nascent technology where there's founder product fit and there's product market fit, but at that stage it's really founder product fit because sometimes there isn't a market and sometimes products can create markets, especially when there's technology that's just emerging. But I'm looking for products that have a really clear application and end user. So not like, dev tools or infrastructure. That's not my zone of genius. So I'm comfortable investing in newer technologies like AI, but it doesn't fit my thesis. If it happens to benefit something that is a great idea, then I think it's something worth taking a look at.
So you would not characterize yourself as a bandwagon jumper then?
No.
Okay. Katelin.
Well, I wish I had something entirely new to add to that, but I agree in that, if you are a founder and you've made the decision to build something, the chances of your success in building in a very, very concentrated market is going to be a lot lower. And so building something that you're deeply passionate about, solving a problem that you're deeply passionate about solving, will always outweigh whatever the hype cycle is. However, if you are a young founder, meaning younger in your entrepreneurial journey, it is important to watch the cycles, whatever is happening, whether it's economic cycle, the product market fit cycle, watching and really understanding what problems are we trying to solve with this, because there's obviously attention and heat on this for a reason. So instead of just saying, oh, well, for example, I was trying to build something in crypto because it was this hot thing, and then all of a sudden the bottom fell out, and now I'm going to be an AI founder, that doesn't really work. And for me as an investor, also very early stage, that is definitely a flag.
Yeah. For me, I love to be on the right side of a hype cycle. I started doing crypto in like 2011. Like everyone else who got into crypto, I was at a Fashion Week party with the Winklevoss twins, and Barry Silbert showed up and was talking about Bitcoin, and I was like, I don't get it. How do you make money with math? And then later on was like, oh, I should have bought a Bitcoin before it was 300, right? So that was a complete accident of luck. And depending on who you talk to, for years after, I was either a total idiot or a complete genius, right? And even now, it's like that proverb, right? We'll see about everything that happened. You never know which way it's going to go. And so, I'm not somebody who shies away from hype, from, this is the buzzy new thing, but I also am not interested in sort of a Johnny-come-lately, the company that was Web3 a year ago and crypto a year before and IoT 5 years before that, is now all of a sudden an AI company, and next week is going to be a God knows what company. Like, that's not my founder. But I'm in a lot of sort of buzzy companies because they became buzzy later, right? And I think like Sophia is a great example of this, right? Like when she started Nasty Gal, everyone was like, nobody wants to buy used clothes. None of this is cool. I don't get this. Like, I remember once I showed one of my investors your website, and he goes, "You can't have that website up at work," because it was like all these girls in sexy clothes, right? But then now you look on Instagram and you're like, oh no, like Nasty Gal walked so Sheehan could run, right? Yeah. And so it's not bad to catch the right timing. But it's also not something where you can just sort of retrofit your personality, your skill set, your experience, lie about your degree, whatever, and all of a sudden seem like you're an expert. So I love it when a founder genuinely is a part of the hype cycle, but you're not going to be able to fool an investor into thinking that like you created Bitcoin. Go SSBF.
I mean, picking up on that, how do you filter out the nonsense? What's your process for educating yourself? You find out about Bitcoin for the first time at a party. How do you educate yourself as an investor to wrap your head around the possibilities and use cases?
I mean, that was like me at a party. I was like 25. I did nothing. I barely had enough money to buy it. As an investor, though, I would say, okay, what is this, right? Cryptocurrency, I haven't heard of that. But cryptography, that seems to be a thing. And then as you dig in, you're like, okay, there's some sort of there, right? Ledgers are a real thing. Distributed ledgers are a real thing. And you can start to sort of can build a framework of, even if it's something new, right? Like AI, I'm not an expert in AI. What I do know about AI is this is a space that Google has been working on for decades, right? This is a space that NVIDIA has been working on for a very long time. This is not something that they came up with yesterday and now it's a buzzword. And so I think that one of the easiest things you can do is sort of back test, like, where did this come from, right? Where are the white papers? Go to Google Scholar. Is this a real thing? And that doesn't tell you whether or not the founder's a real thing, but if people have been doing AI for 20 years and this founder tells you they have a new way to build a chip that's going to be 20 times more efficient and use zero energy, and they have like no credible history in that space, I personally am going to be pretty incredulous versus if they say I was at NVIDIA for 10 years, I was at Google for 10 years, and now I'm building this, like, okay, let's at least have the conversation.
I think that there's also other places that you can look for that kind of canary in the coal mine. The first thing I'll say is I think that there's a misnomer. We say it's a hype cycle, but hype is actually a part of a much larger cycle. So there's the pre-hype, right, which is where the builders who actually have deep industry knowledge, who have been working on this since the very beginning. So it's like not just the tip of the spear, it's the bleeding edge, right? And oftentimes they're within their own community. And so in the pre-hype part of the cycle, looking at places even like Reddit. So my co-founder is Alexis Ohanian. He's the founder of Reddit, yes. But the reason he made that first check into Coinbase in 2012, which is when you wanted to write that first check, was when people were looking at you sideways saying, you're crazy. But Alexis had a deep personal thesis around it because there was an incredibly robust and active community on Reddit around cryptocurrency, right? And so he had places that he was looking where he was engaging with the community and learning and digesting information from a number of different sources. And so when this opportunity came up, was he an expert by any means? No, and he wouldn't pretend that he was. But because of that pre-part of the hype, he was able to then capitalize and hopefully, we're all in early stage investing. We don't expect to have a 100% hit rate. You're going to have to put some bets out there. So he made the bet, paid off, 55x his first fund. So that was a great, again, in hindsight, genius, right? But what comes after the hype cycle is the part that we also forget. So it goes pre-hype, like the real builder's building. You have the hype, everyone's really excited. But what the hype part of the cycle indicates for me is that we are about 8 to 10 years away from like mass adoption. And so after the hype cycle comes the fallout, right? When things kind of go really quiet. The bad actors are shaken out, the charlatans are all told to go home. And the builders who were building previously, or the ones who maybe caught the draft and said, hey, there's something here and I can apply my skill set to solve a really hard problem that I believe in, they're the ones that are going to head down, eyes forward, build. And now they don't have the nonsense and the noise and everything distracting them from continuing to build. Everything has kind of quieted down and they're producing, right? Then, and that's also a good time to invest. So the best time to invest is pre. Second best time is after when things are quiet, especially the secondary market, piping hot. And then at that 10-year that's when it's like, oh, it's everywhere. Because you know who else is running in during the build cycle? Regulators, politicians, big, deep pockets. They're building the framework for this to be sustainable, whatever that technology is, globally.
So you don't need to see a stunning use case at that point. You're saying it's kind of you have a confidence that it's coming down the road because people are inculcating it, kind of basically.
I think that there will be several use cases. We talk about AI, but everyone is really what they're really saying is generative AI. The reality is AI, machine learning, is a massive, massive industry. It's a massive vertical that can be applied to many, many different industries, right? And so tons and tons of use cases. But when after the bubble bursts and you've had the regulators moving in, the policymakers moving in, those big deep pockets building in, that's when you know that they are building infrastructure for this to land in a number of different manifestations.
So you said you weren't looking for AI investments, or you're open to?
I made a recent AI investment, my first, in something called browse.ai, which is this amazing kind of web scraping product where you can basically highlight anything on a website, map it to what is basically a spreadsheet inside of the Browse AI platform, which is a Chrome extension, but also its own platform, and it'll dynamically update pretty much any website, and you can like snoop or reverse engineer anything. It's like Google Alerts for the entire internet.
So just jumping in, how much did you need to know about the underlying tech before you felt comfortable investing in that thing?
Yeah, so the founder had a lot of experience. He's amazing. I also pinged a bunch of people that I know about AI, and so I'll ask questions. Like my question will be, what questions should I ask them? So sometimes it's just like a matter of like parroting what it is that an expert knows. For me, it's like, I'm not investing in it when it's like just emerging. I want to understand the consumer application, even if it's like a B2B consumer, like the end user application. And I want to understand, is the product that something I would use and understand like the end kind of user of, which is still my zone of genius, and it might be AI assisted, but it's something that is differentiated. I don't think people necessarily need to replace products that already exist. Everyone's kind of bolting on AI to everything and has like a little sparkly thing in the corner that you can like do stuff with, but it's just that's kind of not it. So if the underlying technology is something that benefits the product and the product is the idea and the founder's qualified, then I feel like there's a kind of full stack there that I can feel comfortable with.
Just going across the panel, how many AI-related startups have you spoken to this year so far, roughly? Starting with Sophia.
I don't know, probably like 10, not that many. I don't take all the phone calls.
Katelin?
In the last year, one. I have a caveat for that, but we're doing a quick answer here.
I'm the same. I don't take a ton of meetings. Anybody can pitch us, cleocap.com. And so I look at a lot of decks, but I don't take a ton of meetings. And I've really, really, really leaned on expertise. If I can't go to your LinkedIn and understand why you specifically or your team is credible to build, especially in something like AI, you're probably not going to get a meeting.
Okay. I mean, buzzwords mean different things to different people. So in your mind, what makes something an AI startup? Starting with you, Sarah.
Well, as long as you put that in your X profile, right?
Obviously. obviously
how it works. I mean, to me, it depends, right? You don't. I think that the best AI is kind of like the best crypto, and I'm not like I invest some in crypto. But the reason I'm talking about it is I do think there's a lot of sort of analogies to be made between these hype cycles. Whereas, I think the best of it, you're not going to feel it. You're not going to notice necessarily when you're using the product that there's AI embedded in it, right? One of my companies, Forethought AI, won TechCrunch Disrupt years ago, and Dion's amazing. He has a deep expertise in the space. He's building a lot around customer service, and you're not going to feel necessarily that you're dealing hopefully with an AI when you're using, products that they've built on third-party websites. So to me, I get excited about that. Do I think there's fundamental development to do in AI? Sure. Can I underwrite it? Can I make that investment? Not really. Can you build a company in that space if you don't have billions and billions and billions in server space, right? Or tons of fabs to design and manufacture new chips? Probably not. So I don't know if I can necessarily floss at that level, but there is fundamental AI research happening. It's just insanely expensive.
Are you seeing or are you personally advising companies you work with to try to find an AI angle if they can find a legitimate one, or is that something that's really happening organically?
This was my caveat. Not because of that specifically, but when we talk about that cycle, right, the cycle of technology and the hype slice of that, again, to me, that signals that we have some sort of mass adoption down the road, where this technology is probably going to be integrated into many of the things that we do. So if we look at the crypto, hype cycle, specifically NFTs, does my, women's health tech company focused on menopause need to have an NFT? Absolutely not. No, thank you. In fact, please don't pitch that. However, what we do when a hype cycle when the hype part of a cycle comes into play, what we do is we actually do a full portfolio analysis. So when it has to do with a technology or a platform shift, something that's significant, we go through our entire portfolio and actually have a disruption indicator. So we actually grade and rate each one of our portfolios based on how likely is it that this new technology might impact their business in the positive or the negative? And then so we rank everyone 1 through 5 on hey, maybe you can use that tool internally to find efficiencies or whatever the case may be versus holy moly, if you don't adopt this technology and hire people with this skill set, you're going to be out of business. The AI will eat your lunch, right? And so we go through, basically it's a risk assessment for our entire portfolio, and then we bring that score to each company, especially that are sitting on that higher end of potential disruption, and we have the conversation. This is what we graded you, and again, this is not a mark of their performance, but this is how we rated your potential disruption. How are you thinking about it? A, were we right? Because oftentimes, you know your business better than we do. And then B, how have you considered either adopting technology or bringing on team members that can help you sustain through this and, in fact, hopefully catch a drift and thrive, right? So it's less about pushing them to have an AI angle in this particular cycle. It's more about how are you considering this and the impact to your business? Because again, my menopause health tech company did not need an NFT, but they sure as heck might need a health chatbot, right? If you're offering live service, that might be something very additive. So we look at it from that, more of a risk perspective.
Interesting. Also for the group, for the panel, is AI as hot as crypto and Web3, or is it, how would you compare it as far as this to the last one?
I think it's way more exciting. I was such a laggard with Web3, and I kind of never got into it because I looked at the average person and I thought, are they really gonna open this wallet thing and connect this stuff and buy these fake things and run around like a Lego?
I am not the target demographic.
In a fake universe, and in the same thing with VR. For the last I don't know how many years, people are yeah, we're gonna put on a headset and the whole world's gonna change, and I don't know. Maybe it will at some point, but it feels like it took a really long time. With AI, and even now it's early, there are so many applications that I just understand inherently, and I invest in things that I understand, where of course it's hyped, but I don't feel like it's overhyped. And it's actually less hyped than Web3 was, because that just felt like a big kind of house of cards where it was just everybody is, high-fiving one another, paying for big parties, and just this inflated thing that could have really changed things, but didn't change everything in the way that everybody thought it might.
Yeah, I think that too has a lot to do with the timing, right? Like in 21, interest rates were zero.
Yep.
Every dollar was free. Every dollar was free, and everybody was a billionaire, and everybody was going to the moon, and everybody had a Lamborghini wrapped in Dogecoin. And I don't know why, but that was like what we were doing, right? I didn't personally, but some guys in this room probably did. You know who you are. And so, you know, there was a moment there where sort of anything, right? Like think about it like we were both talking about, we were both at weddings recently. Think about like, you know, you're at a wedding, you're at a dance party, it's like towards the end of the night, everybody's like vibing and like there's so much champagne that you are like ready to dance to anything and they drop like the Macarena and you're like, yes! You guys are definitely gonna use that stupid picture now. But like you're doing the Macarena, right? And like nobody did the Macarena with me right now. You know why? Because interest rates are like over 7% and probably gonna hike again this year. And so nobody wants to Macarena with me, right? And so much of it just comes down to like the vibe. And like the vibe right now is so off. And that's why these like little scientists who spent like 20 years working on a problem and who are like, we think in 5 years the data centers will be 3% better. And we're all like, yay, you know, buy NVIDIA, right? Personally, I'm long Taiwan Semiconductor, but that's another story. So like, I think that the Web3, that moment, right? Like Bitcoin week in Miami, like I was at a party that DJ Khaled was, you know, and like the mayor's inside and the cops are there shutting down the party. And it's like, well, you can't shut down the party because the mayor's inside. It's like, it's fine. He just can't leave, right? And like Michael Bay shows up on a boat. Like it's wild. And this was just a random, like that was the cycle. This cycle, I think, is more like, well, AI, what are you going to do with it and what do you know about it? I will take that kind of hype cycle any day.
It's like I'm challenging my expectation or understanding of hype cycles because I think before this panel started, I initially thought that investors expected faster returns with a hype cycle. And I'm guessing that is not true.
But define investors.
Well, people who back early stage startups and expect to get their money back plus some.
I think that was the case a few years ago, and I think everything's been right-sized. So in 2021, that might have been the case. I think it's irresponsible of investors to invest in things where it's like, great, this is going to be marked up a year from now. That's awesome, but the company, that should be based on the merit of the company and what it is that the founder's building, not another like level of hype. So people are being rated now on what they're actually achieving instead of an idea in a deck they've thrown out into the ether and took secondary in 2021 when they had no product. That's just not happening anymore.
Turning back to the founder side of things, if you're a founder, how do you gather social proof for something that's emerging technology that doesn't really have a big user base already or history behind it? Starting at the end, Sarah.
Well, I'll tell you what is not social proof that I see so often, and like you and I had this moment actually. Sophia, recently we were talking about a new app that will remain totally unnamed because gotta love founders, but
Spill.
no, maybe later. But it's when I go onto your app, right, and you're in test flight or whatever, and you are a well-connected founder, and you know everybody, and your angel investors are well-connected, and the entirety of your like early, social proof or like feedback cycle or user base is just a bunch of your friends, right? And they're not, one, the core demographic that actually uses social media, and two, like that's just not a lot of people, right? And it's not bad to hack growth at the beginning, but if you're talking to smart investors, they want to see real social proof. I want to, I'm an investor in Hill House Home. It's one of the only fashion companies I've invested in. I'll be wearing a nap dress all the time. Girls come up to me. They don't know I'm an investor in it. Oh my God, I love your nap dress. Oh, nap dress. I love it. Love that nap dress. That's social proof, right? I am walking around in the wild. I was in Lake Como the other day because I am a VC, and and it was literally, there was a girl wearing a brand new nap dress that like, I don't even know how she got it shipped in time to wear it in Lake Como. Like that's social proof. People are doing express shipping to get it so they can wear it on the other side of the world on their honeymoon or whatever. Social proof isn't you gave it to your best friend and then told your best friend to wear it when you know your best friend's having lunch with an investor. And so being able to tease that out, and not for us, we can generally smell bullshit, but for yourself, so that you know and that you don't sort of confuse. Or the other day, someone told me, I raised $1 million really quickly. And I was like, awesome, I'm so happy for you. How are you thinking about go-to-market? It's a really hard space to get users. well, I raised $1 million really quickly. It's like, great, you're going to spend that at $5 at a time on paid acquisition for your app, and you're going to have 250,000 users who don't use the app, and then you're going to run out of money, and then you're going to go out of business. That's not social proof.
Yeah. I totally agree. It definitely, I think that the advice now, given that we are just coming, we're all on the recovery side of the last big implosion, really, and given all of the macroeconomic things happening in the world, there is a damper. No one's doing the Macarena, except for late nights when we should be. But I think that the lessons or the advice that we would give to founders is like, it does take time. And so be really mindful about where you're applying those resources. Be very patient, apply it to the right places, and when you catch that drift, when you can smell when something is starting to cook, don't hold back. And so I think that oftentimes a lot of investors are, right now, the blanket like platitude is like, reduce burn at all cost. But when you do have that little spark and you see that, apply the resources. Like, that is why you have them. So, it's slow and steady wins the race, because this is, for early stage investors, we're looking at probably a 10-year timeline on any sort of liquidity event. Even then you're doing great. So really just being patient and knowing when to apply resources to the right places that will actually give you that proof.
I think founders should always be collecting data around how their users are feeling, even their first 5 users, and that is social proof. So even if it's behind the scenes and it's not something that people are sharing on Twitter yet, if you're still in beta, every user interaction is an opportunity to collect a testimonial from somebody, and you can monitor. I mean, Superhuman, their product market test was, how disappointed would you be if you didn't use the product, right? That is social proof in a way. It's not the same as like, how happy or sad are you, NPS score, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot more qualitative, yeah, and something that you can take to an investor and be like, look, people are they would be sad. They would be disappointed. Not like, yeah, how happy are you? But it's like, we click on that passively, every day, and in bathrooms at airports, like a happy face button. What is that? And for me, I will spray a product to everybody I know and be like, what do you think about this? With Browse AI, I pinged another founder I knew and was like, check this out. And he was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I just signed up for it and I'm paying for it, which is like, that's what you want. Or I'll send something that's for like the creator economy to my assistant, who posts sometimes and gets free stuff occasionally, and he's like, oh my God, this would be amazing, I'm signing up for it now. So it's just like sending it to the kind of people that would use that product, and seeing how they respond to it is the way that I gather social proof, but also seeing what it is that founders are gathering from their users that they can share. And you should be screenshotting everything, and you can engineer those screenshots. You can ask people those questions, like ask them the questions that lead them to like write the complete sentence that says like, I love this thing, not why do you love this thing, but like in the same way a producer does when they want to conjure, like they want you to start the sentence with, I really love being on panels with Sarah because, instead of saying why do you like being on panels with Sarah, you're like blah 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 because. You want to like engineer what that first part of the sentence is that generates that person having like, I guess, expressing what it is that you want them to without it necessarily being like a passive response.
Cool. Actually, this actually drives, I'm going to skip a question so I can get to the next one. And we are taking audience questions. I just want to get through a couple more. There's some general advice that founders should always be thinking 7 to 10 years ahead. How do you do due diligence on like an emerging technology that doesn't really have that you might not know that much about, or that hasn't really been used widely? Like, is that a concern for you, that you don't really have a sense of how can I kick the tires of this thing when I don't really know how it works and nobody else really does that much either?
We have a few companies in our portfolio that are in frontier tech or space tech. I remember the first time we took our first space tech pitch, and all of us sat there, our eyes wide as saucers, just absorbing, learning. We were just like, holy moly. I think that, those are literal moonshots, right? Yeah. And that's part of our game, is you have to be willing to take the bets and be first one on scene without having that knowledge. But what we've discovered is that, well, this is not a big self-discovery for 776. What I have learned personally as an investor is that when you find a founder who is building in that space, who has deep, deep, deep knowledge, keep them very close. right? And so our very first space tech investment was actually what we would call a wedge investment. It was something to just get us into a space to learn and build a relationship. We met them late. It was a later stage than we typically invest in, so it was a smaller check, smaller ownership, but it was really to immerse ourselves within that industry and start making relationships. And so now, ever since then, every frontier tech company we've had, I ship straight to that founder. He is an extension of our team, and he shows up every single time and has so far not steered us, completely wrong. So it's really about getting within the community and building a relationship, a trustworthy relationship built on genuine care and interest around that shared passion, or a place where you want to learn, and not showing up and pretending like you're the expert in AI when someone pitches you. We're not.
So does that mean if you're following a trend, you are by definition shooting more in the dark than usual, or not?
Yeah, I think the difference, I spent over a decade in my career as an HR executive, and so for me to go in and take a pitch for an HR tech product is very, very different than me taking a pitch for someone who's going to go mine asteroids, and I can show up very, very differently.
Interesting. I do want to get to questions. Okay, so there's one I wanted to ask, actually. Talking about NFTs for a quick second. Katelin, you're on the board of director of Doodles, or the board of directors of Doodles, and last fall, I think they raised, was it $54 million at a $740 million valuation? Bear with me for a second. In March, the founder said on Discord, quote, "We're trying to go from a startup to a leading media franchise. We are no longer an NFT project. The more time, money, resources we invest in following the latest build in public trends that fuel speculation, the less we have to achieve our long-term vision." So my question is this. Would 776 have led that round if Doodles had presented themselves as a future leading media company and not an NFT project?
Spicy question. I like it. Spicy. Here's the answer you didn't expect. I did invest in it because I did not believe it was an NFT project. I invested in it because I spent a significant amount of my early career at Pixar Animation Studios, and I know exactly what a great media franchise looks like. I know exactly the value of IP. And that was why I invested in Doodles. Not because of the hype cycle, not because they were, the amount of revenue they were making on a drop was insane, but that's not sustainable. You can't jump into the money machine with your duct tape suit and expect that to last forever. What I invested in was a media and entertainment company. And for the founder to come out and share that with a community who fell in love with the art and fell in love with the founders and the project because they discovered it through blockchain technology, that's a beautiful thing. And the community accepted that with open arms, because guess what? Now we have Doodles partnered with the Camp Store in Chicago. You can go and have an immersive experience with your family. I got my Doodles Crocs in the mail yesterday. I've got my Doodles Adidas. Like, this is very, very valuable IP, and that's what we invested in.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Not a gotcha. I said it. Not a gotcha. I have no gotchas. They're all like open questions.
It's okay.
So again, I guess my last question is: it's completely legitimate, or probably even expected, for a company founded during a hype cycle to pivot to something else that doesn't represent what they came onto the scene being. Basically, that's totally fine.
Totally.
Okay, great.
Yes.
All right. Do we have any questions from the audience? I see one person up here in the, okay, a couple, yes, you over here, woman in the second row. Can you stand up, please?
A mic runner?
We have a mic to, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I think we're expecting a mic runner to be.
There's microphones in the, there, over there in the.
Right.
Hello.
Hello, hi.
Thank you for your great talk. It's an honor to see all of the female founders here. I just have a question about how some founders might benefit from representing themselves as a startup that is a part of a hype cycle. I see that all three of y'all here are saying that we are against hype cycle. It's like we don't want to see founders who say they're AI startup founder and they are not. But in reality, we see a lot of companies raising huge amount of money and huge valuation during these hype cycles. And as a founder, do you think it's like a valid strategy to represent yourself as those hyped companies to a certain extent, or do you think that's not the right thing to do?
Yeah, I think it's about what you can do authentically, right? If your company is a D2C dog toothbrush, right? That's not AI, you're not using AI, you're not doing special form, like trying to say you're an AI D2C dog toothbrush isn't going to make sense. But if you say actually it's custom and, we get pictures of your dog's mouth and then we use AI as some part of it, right? Then sure, you can lean into that more. It also depends on your audience, right? If you're an AI company, you're probably not going to do well on Good Morning America trying to explain like GPUs, right? Even my eyes glaze over. However, if you're talking to, a class, a post-grad class in AI at MIT, then that would be great. And so a lot of it, I think, is knowing, think about it like, what do you wear to dinner, right? Well, am I going to like a hot dog shack at, sort of off the grid in a park, or am I going to a Michelin-starred restaurant? I'm the same person. It's my wardrobe, but I'm going to show up in a way that makes sense for the context. And, I'm allergic to shrimp, so you're probably not going to see me at a shrimp boil which would be like, the dog startup talking about AI. So if it's credible to what you do, don't be afraid to lead with it. And don't be shy about the fact that, hey, I got my undergrad degree in AI and I've been doing this, for a decade, and I'm really excited that the world is catching up. Like, people love to hear that kind of stuff, but don't think that you're going to be able to trick investors very long, or reporters for that, by just putting AI all of a sudden in your name or, putting it at the end of your domain name.
Thanks for your question. Follow-up from me, if I may. What kind of bandwagon jumpers are good bets to you?
I think that it makes sense if it's something that you've liked for a long time and that you've wanted to do, but the world wasn't. So to go back to crypto, cryptography was a thing before cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency was a thing before Bitcoin. But if you were sitting there in 2009 thinking or 2007, before the Satoshi white paper, there was no market to build a Bitcoin company, right? And then all of a sudden there was. And so you saying, oh my God, I'm so excited, I can quit my job at the CIA where I'm doing cryptography and go build in crypto because that's what I'm really passionate about, but there was no market, that's a good bandwagon jumper.
Any other thoughts on the panel?
Upvote.
I'm looking for someone who either has domain expertise. If they're jumping on a bandwagon, they need to have domain expertise, a really solid co-founder who has domain expertise, or they need to be a second-time founder who's built something amazing and knows how to assemble a team with the level of expertise that they need to build whatever bandwagon it is that they're building on.
But I don't need to have like an MS in AI and machine learning to get a meeting, though.
Someone probably should.
Okay.
Someone probably should.
That's actually reassuring.
Yeah.
Another question from the audience.
Call me.
Absolutely love this panel. Great stuff. My question is, how do you craft and message your pitch if your end use case or audience is someone that the investor wouldn't relate to, like teenage girls, for instance, or female gamers?
People love money. VCs love money. How do you think we afford going to Lake Como? So if you can tell us, right, teenage girls drive X% of spending in, the US, and they are this size of the population, and the average amount of money that a teenage girl spends, blah, 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 because most VCs do not look like us. They're about 15 years older, and they're married, which means that there's a 50-50 chance that they have a teen girl, right, if they have children. So less than 50%, but whatever, gender's not a binary. But, the reality is that, like, if you talk to them, even me, I know about teen girls, I used to be one, but I want to hear about money because I need to go back to Lake Como.
There's actually a saying specifically related to teen girls that I learned when I joined the ranks of the VCs. Teen girls rule the world. If you look at spending, if you look at data, teen females, they drive every trend.
It's a huge total addressable market, it seems.
Massive.
Yeah.
Massive.
Keep throwing. Another audience question? Yes, sir. Yes.
Hi, just talking about how you value a company that's in an emerging space. Let's say you have a startup that uses data and AI to personalize an experience, something that maybe is a little unique. How do you come to a valuation as a startup in what that company could potentially be worth, aside from just basic, market opportunity?
Well, I'm going to give the most boring answer. We are a registered investment advisor, so we're an RIA, which means the SEC is very curious and interested about all of our processes every day, all day. So we have a really, really strict valuation process, and it is a very complicated, I wish that it was less complicated, process that involves both our legal team, our head of finance and compliance, and a ton of work from our analysts. So you're going out and you're looking at comps, you're pulling all of this stuff. It's a really, unfortunately, heavy process because we're an RIA.
I think you either make it up or somebody sets it for you. And if you make it up, if something's only worth what someone's willing to pay for it, there's a reason that clothes go on sale. So if that doesn't work, you're going to have to rethink your valuation.
Yeah, generally you're going to sell about 10 to 20% of your company each round. So if you're raising $1 million, you're worth 5 to 10 million.
Quick question before we go back to the audience. Can any of you share a hype cycle you regret not getting in on?
Oh, well, hindsight's 20/20. Come on, every single one.
Okay. Well, let's pivot. Can you share a hype cycle you regret getting in on then?
Oh, that's a harder question.
No, I mean, there's always deals where you're like, oh, but I personally think that that's often more about founder dynamics or cap table dynamics or something, the pivot they decided to go into than the space writ large. But I also don't invest in stuff I don't like. I never did VR because putting on a VR headset makes me nauseous, and I don't like being nauseous.
I've invested in hype companies, but I haven't, this is my first fund. I've been an angel investor for a long time, but I haven't lived through a bunch of hype cycles, but there's one company I can point to that was very hyped that I should have stayed away from. And I'm pretty sure before they had any revenue, the founder was like buying lattes with the secondary he took from my $150,000.
A lot of lattes.
I regret that, yeah.
So-
I bought all his lattes.
Sorry.
I asked for a refund.
How'd that go?
I was like, if you're not going to refund my money, I want you to write a check that size into the fund.
And
He
happy
didn't.
ending? Or?
I should call him again. I don't know.
I mean, we got it.
We will call him.
Anyway, we'll get
the
back.
collective.
Do
we'll
things
call.
like that.
We can get, I think, maybe 2 questions in if we're quick. Yes, please.
Pleasure to meet you today. My name is Alex, founder at Goals. What do you think about conversational voice AI and its current industry hype stage? Thanks.
I think it's something like that. If there's not a huge fundamental sort of tech that you're building, it's really going to be about user adoption and how do you get more users than the other 10 trillion people building in the space.
We've got 10 seconds. Last question, please.
For the earliest stage companies, especially in the post-hype cycle?
So we couldn't hear the beginning.
Metrics for early stage companies, especially in the post-hype.
For evaluating them, yes, especially in the post-hype cycle.
I'm sorry, we're actually out of time, but we'll take this question offline. Thanks very much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.